And hello again. So now that we have a decent enough shadow that we will be satisfied with for now, we're going to try to work a bit on the car itself to bring it to a certain level. So for a car this dark, and well, depending on the current darkness levels, the very first thing I would do is be sure that I have the correct black levels. So in my experience, there are different types of black levels, let's say. There's the actual black level that would be the minimum value you can get from film emulsion, for example. In this case, our plate is digital, and we don't get this kind of luxury, but we do get minimum values, of course. Now, the thing is, this element itself, the plate we have up there, is not... it's fairly high contrast, but we don't have like very, very black objects. Ideally, what you want to sample for a car integration, for example, if you are integrating a car in a street, the best case scenario for you would be to sample the minimum values of one of the cars. For example, underneath the wheels or something like this. These parts would be the ground truth, let's say, that you would need to use to lift the values of your car, your CGI car. Now, for this case, what I'm going to do is a kind of a lazy technique, but which sometimes yields good results, and it's fast, which is the most important. So basically, you create a curve tool, which, as you probably know, is a node which allows you to do pixel color analysis across an image. And I'm going to do max luma pixel analysis. Now, max luma pixels is a bit of a misnomer because it not only finds the pixel with brightest values in the image, it also finds the pixel with the lowest values in the image. So I'm going to launch the analysis, which hopefully should be relatively fast. And I'm going to select the whole frame range. Yep. There you go. And as you see, it goes quite fast, which is good for us. Now we're gonna from this we're gonna recover an animated black level. That's not literally what we would want in some occasions, but in our case scenario, it's actually gonna. I think it should work quite nicely. Now the first thing we can see is we're gonna filter the min luma pixel values. So we just have the curve of the minimum pixel values. And as you see, it evolves a bit in during the shot. It also is very unstable. We have all these peaks and valleys, and these are fairly flickery. So what I would recommend is let's copy the values of this in an add. I'm just going to grab in my thumbnail there, gonna go to minimum luminance pixel value. I'm going to copy animation, and I'm gonna put it in this one. Paste, absolute. Oop, there we go, and paste again. There we go. So now we have the proper animation curve on all channels. We can probably lose the the one on the alpha. We don't need it, and leave it at 0. Now the idea is that now in this add node, I have values which should, there you go, move. Now these values are of course very flickery for now. So the one thing I'm gonna want is if I go back to my curve editor, I don't need all these very high frequency variations because these are probably just due to differences in pixels. It could be due to digital noise. It could be due to plenty of things, and just quite simply features going in and out of the shot, like a very small faint area of shadows, for example. But what does interest me, what is really interesting to me, is the overall curve. This one can be useful. Our shot doesn't have that much variations in terms of broad variations of brightness. But again, in many cases, when you are working on a bigger film, you will see those kind of things happening because of exposure changes, because of flaring. So again, for all those reasons, what I'm going to do is I'm going to filter this. So I'm going to select the different curves and right click and edit. And you have two ways to do that. You could filter, or you could filter will just smooth the curve for you and leave one key, one animation key per frame. Or you could also click generate, for example, and generate will try to, from this curve, create another curve, and you can select the increment. So this function, for example, is very useful when you want to bake out a noise. When you created a noise or a dynamic link or an expression, you can bake this out as keyframes. If you do select a bigger increment, what it will do is that it will set the key of your curve, but only every increment frames of your curve. So for example, if I select 10, it will create a first key at the first frame and the second one at the 10th frame. All the keys in between will be lost. Sometimes it can be useful to resample your curves like this, especially when you know that you're going to edit your curves by hand. You want to have the same broad curve, but you want to retain the ability to broadly animate a few moments, which is more convenient than having an increment of one. In my case here, I will just filter because I think that would be enough. And I'm going to test it once first, see how it goes. All right, so that's better, but that's still a bit strong to me. So I'm going to filter it a bit more, like 3. Okay, so now I've got these big broad curves, and I'm going to try to use this as a base. So what I do is usually I try, whenever I have a shot like this, I try to keep elements which I know I'm going to use in different parts of the shot. I try not to duplicate them all over my script. I try to centralize it in one. So for example, this one would be my overall black level. So I'm going to create a backdrop and name it just quite simply black level. And sometimes I also like, just for consistency, well, not for consistency, but for my own, how to say, as a convention, I like to, again, give me visual cues of what's happening. So my backdrop, I color it in black because this is a black level. When you get a very big script, it can really help. Now, I'm going to plus this. Oops, sorry. So this is my car. There we go. In colors. So I'm going to unpromote it to be sure that I'm not ruining the alpha. I mean the values which are supposed to be transparent. And promote. And I will add this black level value here. And again, I'm not in my add node. I did not put any value in the alpha. So normally, if I go there we go. We have a 0 here. So normally we would not be adding any alpha here because the only channel, the input alpha channel in the A stream is equal to 0. However, again, by security, I will just remove it from here. So now I'm only affecting red, green, and blue. Now let's have a quick look. It's most likely going to be too strong, but I want to have a first look. All right, so yes, it's a bit too strong, but I do get the sense that it's starting at least to live in the same world. As you notice also, my occlusion now looks a bit too dark compared to the rest of the shot. So I will need to do something similar for the occlusion. I'll get back to it in a moment. Now, the other thing I want to prepare before we go into more details is I want to have a quick look at the passes that Charles gave me. So I have a diffuse color, which is just the actual color of the diffuse map with no lighting information. And I have the direct diffuse, which will be just the diffuse component of the sun. I have the direct specular, which will be probably our main light here. At least the main contributor to the look of the car. This is a the direct reflection of the sun and most likely some of the sky too. And then we have indirect diffuse, which is very, very light. So this is going to be most likely be bounced from the ground. And indirect specular, which will be the reflection from the environment around. So what I'm going to do very quickly is I'm going to create a very small nodal graph where I will split out the two direct, the specular and diffuse direct. So direct diffuse, and I'm going to split also the direct specular. And these two, if I plus them, this is basically the whole contribution of the main key light of Charles. And that is of great interest to me because I would like to change the exposure of this light, make the sun brighter, because in my image, the car tends to be really dim in these areas. So I would want to expose it up, but I don't want to break the relationship between the diffuse and the spec. That's something that is more tied to the shading, and for broad strokes like this, I would like ideally to not change it too much. So for that, I'm going to merge node. Well, actually, I'm going to create a merge node here. And I'm going to subtract with a from. I'm going to subtract this key light from the car. So we have the car, and I'm subtracting this main contribution. If you expose up, you see that I still have, in the car, I still have the bounce from the floor. I still have the interaction of the environment, but I no longer have the contribution of the main key light, which will allow me in turn to modify it and plus it again after. Again, as a good practice, I like to protect the alpha whenever I do an operation in this branch, so that I'm affecting the colors but not the alpha. All right, so we have this, and now if I create another plus, here for example, I'm just adding back the values that are removed with the from. So car very dark, and car here with the sun. And this in turn allows me to start grading. So for example, I would like to expose up my car. Say, this is density by default, that's not good. I should be in stops. Usually directors and supervisors speak in stops. So I would recommend that your exposure node, you set it up to always work in stops. It's a bit easier to relate to your supervisors this way. And as you see, when I'm doing that, I'm already exposing up and I'm gaining some values, some contrast, and even these highlights are starting to pop a bit more. So I think, let's see how it looks in the environment. All right, so for me, it's probably still too low, and I will need to readjust my black levels. But what I'm gonna do is, well, I think that my reflection is actually a bit too green. If you look at the sky around, I feel that these values are a bit too pale and green. So I'm going to try, for example, to grade a bit my values here. And I'm going to add a bit of blue. So 0.2. All right, so already we see a bit more values, but now maybe a bit too saturated. So let's try to stay in par. Right. So here what I did is just brightening the blue in the end and just brightening up the other colors in turn so that they at least stay in the same level. I'm still mostly adding blue, but it's convenient for me to work like this. All right. So I'm going to continue a bit. Yep. The one thing I can see immediately is that the right side of the car is also suffering for the same issue. It's quite dark, and I would expect it to be kind of reflective. So in this case, it's going to be roughly the same system. I'm going to create a small element, and I'm going to make it so that the shuffles are actually shuffling out the indirect diffuse and the indirect specular. There we go. And I'm going, all right, so this one I actually want to add. I don't necessarily need to correct the colors. I think by default they are already quite faint. So this one I'm not gonna remove from the element. I'm going to add directly. That's not ideal in terms of it's not super clean in terms of managing your CG element, but usually it's acceptable. It's an acceptable level of tweaks. The one thing you want to make sure of when you are comping an element like this is that whenever you are close to your CGI element, you want to be sure that every operation you make can be reverted a bit later. So for example, in this case, I'm removing the direct diffuse specular and I'm adding it back. And this is kind of preserving all of the logic inside the different passes. This one, technically, I could match with just a simple exposure up of these specific elements, but I'm also just adding it on top because it's a bit faster, and literally you can do that. It's maybe frowned upon depending on your supervisor, depending on what you want to do, but it's also a perfectly valid option in our case. So now the result of this, exposing it up, is that I'm starting to see this nice level of reflections on the side of the car, which is quite nice. I like the fact that we see the shader reacting to the environment. All right. Now, we are not done with the car, obviously, but I would like, at this point, the occlusion is starting to be really disturbing. So I would like to show you a quick technique. Again, depending on the shot, it may be sometimes more useful than others. On this shot in the test I ran before, it seemed to give us good results. What's happening here is that we're darkening the occlusion, and it's actually darker. It's becoming darker than what we actually want our black levels to be for this plate. So the one thing we can do is make sure that the grade we are applying with the occlusion is either not going lower than the black levels of our plate, or that we are compensating for it. So for this, there is a quick solution, which again, sometimes works quite nicely. I'm going to move the black levels here. And let me try to zoom in. All right, just reorganize this a bit. Dots are the best node in Nuke. All right, yeah, this. All right, so my occlusion is happening, just here. What I want is subtract, merge. There we go. Create a merge node, and we are going to subtract the black levels from that part of the script. So what happens here now is that I am literally lowering the overall values of my shot. Now when I'm grading this, I'm starting to darken the values, but it's the values which are without the black level. And now I can plus again, after the color correction, I can plus again my element, and this should lift, there we go, that should lift my occlusion to a level which is matching the black levels of my overall plate. Sometimes, in rare occasions, that might break a bit. You might need to fiddle around, color grade a bit more the black levels for this specific use, or just lower a bit the occlusion, for example. But I think, generally speaking, it allows you to go already in the right ballpark. You are not, this way you're preserving your plate, basically. All right, so that concludes that small lesson. I will carry on with more details. We'll go more in depth with how to enhance the actual lighting of the car, and we will start going in different, see different techniques to integrate it properly. And it will start to seep into lensing, as you will probably see. All right, see you.